Hi guys, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my book channel. If you're new here, hello. It's been a while since I've sat down and talked to you about books, and well, to be honest, I've just been doing tag videos because it seems they're the quickest for me to film. I saw Jack Edwards do his top 5 books he's read of the year so far, and I thought that's a very good idea because I actually have read more books this year in comparison to how many I read in total last year. So going off of my Bookstagram, I believe I am currently on my 19th book of the year so far, which is insane because I only read 20 books in 2020, which kind of sounded quite cool. I have 5 books beside me that I consider to be favourites of this year so far, and they vary from each other, I guess, slightly. Most of them are thrillers because that's my go-to genre, but there's a romance thrown in, so yeah. If you want to know what my top 5 books I've read so far this year are, then give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. First book that I'm going to talk about is a classic, and this is one, I feel like classics that either you have never ever read them or you just tend to read the most popular ones. But classics as a whole are quite hard to grasp if you've never read them before. The first 5 out of 5 that I gave this year was to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I feel like this is such a good one, especially if you are an avid thriller mystery reader like I am and you wanted to read a classic that's got more of a plot line, I guess. It's kind of like a ghost, essentially it's a ghost story about Rebecca, who is Mr. De Winter's dead wife. And essentially it's kind of like a ghost story, but the way it's told is so haunting, and it's so addictive. The language isn't too dense, if you will, because I feel like some classics you look at it, the first page, and you're like, I don't understand any of this. However, Rebecca truly kept me captivated for an entire week of my life, and I'm so glad that I read this book before I watched the movie. Because it made me love the book so much more, and I feel like if you are into thrillers and mysteries, then Rebecca is such a good one to start with because it keeps you guessing the whole way through, because you kind of feel like, obviously the ghost of Rebecca, she kind of just is everywhere. She's not really an actual ghost, it's not a ghost story, but essentially I guess it kind of is. I don't know, but anyway, this was my first 5 out of 5 that I gave this year, so it happened to be a classic, but like I said, I would recommend this if you are looking to get more into classics that have a bit more of a exciting plot. Next on my list is a rom-com. This one just made me laugh hysterically out loud, because it obviously, why am I explaining what laughing out loud is like? Anyway, this is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. It's a typical will they, won't they date. They've been friends for years, they went to college together, their lives have moved on, and then they both come back into each other's lives, and everyone that knows them is just like, did you guys ever date? And they're like, no, we never did. It's a classic will they, won't they story with the humour that's thrown in just is exactly what I needed at the time. I think this is just before we went out of, or back into the world, when the world opened, well, I say the world, well, when England opened up again, so I read this literally before I went back to work, and it was great. It was I loved the ending made me tear up. It was just such a feel-good book, and like I said, I tend to read more thrillers and mysteries than I do rom-coms. However, I do gravitate towards rom-coms, so this one was one of those books that I saw constantly on Bookstagram and on BookTube, and I was like, I've never heard of this author, and I don't think I would have picked this author up had it not been for BookTube and Bookstagram raving about it, and I can see why, because it was hilarious and the ending was just so wholesome, and I would highly recommend it if it's steamy. If you need to read a good old romance that's got a lot of steam in it, I can't tell you more than you need to read this book. It's great. I loved it. I gave this, I think I gave it 4.5 beautiful, so highly recommend. I've got this one first. The third book on my list is probably no surprise to anyone that either reads my captions on my Bookstagram or I have watched any of my videos. This one was, I don't know if I gave the other books 4 stars or like, I know I gave Rebecca 5 stars. I gave the other one like 4.5, and I definitely know I gave this 5 out of 5 because I literally read it in about 48 hours. On the fence about reading a Colleen Hoover book. I was quite surprised that an author decided to like do a U-turn, a switch, I guess, because from what I saw on Bookstagram and BookTube, Colleen Hoover's known for romance per se and kind of like deep topics. Like, I know the book on my bookshelf, the other book I own by her is called Regretting You, and that's not necessarily a romance or a thriller, but it's to do with like family relationships and stuff like that. Anyway, I've not read the book yet, besides the point. This one, Verity, I kid you not, I could not put this down. I was hooked from the very first sentence, and you know when a book is just so good that you're like, what possibly could be the twist? And you generally cannot guess, and I think if you read a lot of thrillers, sometimes you can predict it from like, you know, the halfway point, but I genuinely got like shivers, and I just loved this book. Like, it was so good that I did not see any of the twists coming. And if you don't know what this book is about, it's about a author called Lowen Ashley, who she accepts a job of a lifetime and she goes to be a ghostwriter of, yeah, Verity Crawford is an author, but she's been in an accident, so Lowen Ashley is hired to finish Verity's book, and the wild ride that this book takes you on, I genuine shock and like out loud being like, what the fuck. I could not put it down. I highly recommend. And like I said, I think Colleen Hoover is a brilliant author. The fact that this was the first book I read by her and I generally couldn't put it down. The twist, like, mind blown. Again, before Bookstagram or BookTube, I wouldn't have necessarily picked up this author, but it was great. 5 out of 5. Okay, this one is The Couple Next Door by Cherie Lapina. Again, I feel like there's a theme here where had I not made a Bookstagram in lockdown, had I not made a BookTube in lockdown, I would have never picked up these books or never heard of these authors. Not heard of them, but like, you know, I wasn't like averagely reading that much in the year before lockdown. Like, I read like 2 books the year before that, and then lockdown happened and then I read like 20 books. And I've almost read 20 books in 2021. So, you know, my reading spirits have you know, it's what I do with my time now. It's a hobby, it's great. This book is called The Couple Next Door by Cherie Lapina. I did a whole video dedicated to this book because I loved the way that Cherie Lapina infused postpartum depression into this book. Even though it's a thriller, I think sometimes she does that really well with her books, where she includes a really important subject that sometimes necessarily you wouldn't really think to be in like a thriller sometimes. Like, I sometimes hate that's the twist in thrillers, you know, where they throw in at the end that, oh, they've like got bipolar or they've got schizophrenia, and that ends up being the twist in thrillers. I'm not really a fan of that, but I feel like in this case the way the subject of postpartum and postnatal depression was handled within a thriller was just so well done that it didn't really like bother me. Lapina does it really well, and I love that her chapters are short and snappy and, you know, get to the point. But this obviously is about a couple next door, and they go to dinner next door and they leave their baby asleep in their cot. They have the baby monitor and they think, well, you know, we're literally next door, like what could possibly happen to their baby? So you follow this story of Your husband said it will be fine. After all, you only live next door. You'll have the baby monitor and you'll take turns to go back every half an hour. Your daughter was sleeping when you checked on her last, but now as you race up the stairs in your deadly quiet house, your worst fears are realised. She's gone. You've never had to call the police before, but now they're in your home and who knows what they'll find. What would you be capable of when pushed past your limit? Again, this one, I feel like I've got to like a point where thrillers sometimes I'm either very like underwhelmed or like they do the twist and the ending and the last quarter of the book so well that I'm like, what the hell. One I gave it like 5 out of 5 and I read it in 48 hours I think. And I really enjoyed this one because I never guessed who took the baby until they told me in the book. Obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but if you've never read anything by Shari Lapena, I would highly recommend, because her chapters are so short and sweet and I just love the pace of it, and that's what I'm finding lately with thrillers and stuff, is sometimes because I've read so many, not so many, like I don't read like, you know, one a day, but because I've read so many that sometimes I kind of, you know, can foreshadow like the ending or the twist or anything. I'm just really happy that Bookstagram led me to this author because I just really enjoyed this book and I would highly recommend it. The 5th book of the year so far in 2021 that I've read so far this year obviously is a book by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is called After I Do. And this book, I think basically I wanted to read a Taylor Jenkins Reid book that not a lot of people had talked about before I read like Daisy Jones and the Six and the Seven Husbands. This one called After I Do first, and no one really talks about this book and I don't know why, because it's so beautiful. It's so, I mean, this book made me like full on like cry many times. Basically this book is about Lauren and Ryan, who they've literally not been married very long and they decide to take a full year apart and not divorce but not see each other or live in the same house as each other literally not long after they've got married. So obviously they had this idea of being newlyweds and happy and everything, but the reality is that's completely not the case, and they're trying to find out how to live without each other to see if they can come back together in a year's time and either continue their marriage or get divorced. And it's not something that either of them are really like wanting. Obviously they want to see if time apart can make their marriage stronger. Ups and downs of them learning how to be by themselves whilst still having a husband and having a wife but not actually being together. This took me on a roller coaster of emotions. I think this was the first book this year that actually made me cry, and I don't think books make me cry that often. Not that I'm like a cold-hearted person, because I'm quite emotional, but I just think books, I think I just got really attached to these characters, and Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is just so beautiful, and I'm really excited to read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo this month. But I highly recommend this book if you are into Taylor Jenkins Reid and you've never heard of this book before. My top 5 books of the year so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you would like to, no pressure or anything, and I shall see you guys in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!